Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you're very welcome. I'm Dr. Kat and this is Reading the Past. Today, I want to talk about Katherine Parr. Katherine Parr is perhaps most famous for being the sixth and final wife of Henry VIII. In the old rhyme, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived, Katherine Parr is the one that survived. In factual and fictional accounts of her life, she is frequently presented as little more than a nursemaid. The ideal final wife for an ailing, cantankerous and frankly lethal King Henry. She brings together his children and creates out of the chaos of this dysfunctional family a sense of normalcy and peace for his final years. She is a proto-Florence Nightingale whose patience and silence are simply legendary. Sainted Catherine. How very boring. Of course, nobody is that one-dimensional, and while these are all factors of Catherine, they are not the whole of her. And for me, Catherine is fascinating because she is a political animal and she thinks 4 or 5 steps ahead. In many ways, the politicking that we see in Elizabeth when she becomes queen could quite easily have been learnt at her stepmother's knee. She is a smart woman with aspirations, both for her own political power, but also for her personal faith. She is an ardent, devoted Protestant. And for me, there is an image that quite clearly shows her political aspirations and nous at work, and it's this one. This full-length portrait from 1545, attributed to Master John, shows Katherine Parr. She is the first English woman, not even a queen, but the first English woman full stop to have herself painted full length standing on a Turkish carpet. Now, why is that significant? Well, Henry frequently has himself painted full length on Turkish carpets. Carpets like these are incredibly expensive. They would perhaps most commonly be found on tables or on walls. They are decorative items, so to be standing on them is a mark of somebody's extraordinary wealth and also power. For a woman to be featured with a Turkish carpet, it's quite possible that Catherine is borrowing from techniques in Flemish art, where the Virgin Mary is frequently pictured as being with these Turkish carpets. So in this one choice, Catherine is showing herself to be royal and asserting her royal position and power, but she is also highlighting her feminine piety by connecting herself in this way with the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus. Also significant is the clothing that she has chosen to be portrayed in. These are the finest fabrics and materials. Her outer gown is quite clearly shot through with gold and silver thread. Now, these threads weren't produced in England till at least 1590. So clearly these are imported, expensive luxury wares. The same goes for the pearls that ornament her gown and hood. Pearls don't grow in English waters, so these are also imported fine goods. So Catherine is presenting herself as a woman of taste and discernment, keen to engage with these European marketplaces to find the goods that most appropriately ornament her royalty. Perhaps the most striking element of the portrait is, however, the cameo girdle that Katherine Parr wears around her waist, hanging down. It's an incredibly large piece of jewellery, and Susan E. James calls this a hallmark in portraits of English queens. So in this wearing of cameos, Catherine is conforming to the image making that is common among English queens, her predecessors and those that will come after her. But one thing she does that is, again, incredibly novel among queens, both in England and in Europe as a whole, is the brooch she wears at her chest. If you can see, there's a crown on it. Katherine Parr, in doing this, is the first European queen regnant or queen consort to be figured wearing a crown of any kind. Indeed, even in the next generation, if we exclude the coronation portrait of Elizabeth I, there is no queen consort or queen regnant in Europe who is painted wearing a crown. So in just these elements, in these assertions of her piety, but most significantly, her royal position and power, this is not a meek, mild, humble nursemaid. This is a woman who knows where she belongs in the world and is quick and keen to assert that place. The full-length portrait that Katherine Parr commissions Master John to make, the reasoning behind doing so is made all the more clear when we realise that in that same year, Henry has commissioned a painting of his family that looks like this. In it, we see him with his children. We have Mary and Elizabeth and little Edward, and by his side is Jane Seymour, who by 1545 has been dead for 8 years. Also, Henry himself has married 3 further times. He has annulled 1 marriage, beheaded 1 wife, and now he's with Katherine Parr. While Katherine leaves behind no documentation in a written form of how she felt about this resurrection of her predecessor, for me, her selecting to have this portrait painted in these ways is almost a manifesto. Henry and Catherine had married on the 12th of July 1543, and the following summer Henry went off to fight the French. He left Catherine as Regent of England. She chose at this time to bring together the royal children and keep them with her throughout the summer that Henry was campaigning at Hampton Court. She also acted politically. She signed documents and gave orders and acted on behalf of her king as a protector of the realm. I believe that during this period she was seeing it very much as a test run, that her protectorship of the realm while her husband was away fighting was essentially a dry run for what could happen if her husband predeceased her. And as she was essentially acting as a nursemaid of sorts, she would have been aware of how unwell he was, and that it looked increasingly unlikely that Edward was going to reach a majority before his father died and left him as King of England. I believe that Catherine is laying the groundwork to head up a regency council. She cultivates a relationship with Edward. He writes to her and refers to her as his mother. And in many ways, considering how young he was when his own mother died and the quite convoluted behaviours that happened afterwards, with Anne of Cleves being divorced from Henry VIII and then Catherine Howard being executed by Henry VIII, it's most likely that for Edward, Katherine Parr was really the only mother he knew. So she is building on these personal relationships, but she's also engaging in a political image fashioning to place herself in this position where she can take charge if, or rather when, her husband dies. I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, give it a like, subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon next to it so you know when I'm next uploading. If you'd like to tell me anything about this video, you can leave it in the comments section down below, or you can come and find me over on my social media, on my Instagram and my Twitter. I'm going to leave the links in the description box. I've really enjoyed spending this time with you, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. Take care. Bye-bye for now.